I'm excited today because I'm here with Aaron Gentzler from, he's a publisher over at Mauldin Economics, which is kind of one of the, I don't know, like one of the longest running, I think, publications around. It's hugely respected, but also like Aaron, you have a ton of experience as a publisher. You've done some time at Agora. You've been at Mauldin. So thanks for joining me.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So Aaron and I had exchanged back and forth a while back, and it's kind of like the whole like thing that is great about this for me is we get to talk with smart people about the industry and the business. And I don't know, like Aaron, like to kick this off, this is going to be obviously very free flowing, but kind of how would you describe like kind of the current state of the industry right now in terms of just, there's a lot of struggles with conversion on the back end and things like that. And with your kind of experience in the industry, how do you put this into context?
I put it in context. I put it in perspective. We have to look at the market first. And obviously the market's better thus far this year than it was most of last year, but things are still very tumultuous. People are very uncertain. We don't right now, as you and I speak, for example, we don't know what's going to happen with the debt ceiling. That continues to be the political theater du jour, and we don't know who's going to give and what that compromise is ultimately going to look like. We still have the Fed talking about, just the other day, I guess Bullard was on CNBC, and we said it's possible that we're going to have 2 more hikes yet this year, right? What does that do to the consumer? What does that do to the consumer appetite? So you have these headwinds in the markets. You have policy headwinds. What's going to happen with unemployment, right? The consumer now spending is coming down a little bit. Like, thank goodness, like grocery and gas prices are moderating a little bit, right? Maybe we get into summer travel season, we get that huge gas price spike that everybody's talking about, right? And things get really soft really quick. Well, what does that do for demand for discretionary spending throughout the economy? And financial newsletters are part of that, because people out there looking for answers. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for people that they can trust. But like, a dollar is precious in environments like this. So if you're going to put an offer out there, you're going to put a month of development time behind putting an idea out there, get your whole team wrapped up in an idea. Especially at times like this, you have to make sure that you're absolutely putting your best content, your best ideas, and your best foot forward. Otherwise, it's gonna pass in the wind, and no one's gonna pay attention to it. So to answer your question directly, after that, as like a preamble, what we're doing right now is we're focusing on quality, and we're just trying to make sure that every email, every message, every subject line, every CTA, every single touch point, everything that we're doing, is it the best that we can possibly do right now to meet the reader where they are, right, and what they're thinking about and what they need, like. And we can talk about, awareness and top of mind and all these these classic tools that we have at our disposal. But when the going gets tough, like it has been for the last 18 months plus, that's what puts a business to the test. Is can you rise to that challenge and continue to put your best ideas in front of folks? So that's to the extent possible, that's what we're trying to focus on a daily basis.
Yeah. So this is not a good enough publishing kind of environment.
No.
But
no.
What I love about this, the way that you explain this, is because I feel like this is a big gap in a lot of people in the industry and a lot of approaches that people have in the industry, that was only allowed for because of how easy it was to sell for a while. That you're actually like talking about the market, you're actually talking about the consumer, you're talking about what's actually happened in the economy and in the markets, impacting directly publishing as a business, not just publishing as an editorial product.
Yes.
Right. And I think people forget that, like, and
yes,
that's even more fundamental than like the fact that like a lot of people who are putting out editorial and content don't even care about the markets that much, which is a quality problem. But like,
those people should, if I may, how honest do you want me to be? Do you want me to just okay?
If you hurt feelings, you hurt feelings.
The people who fit the description that you just gave, if I may give those, I know you have a very high level audience, so I know I'm speaking to the choir. I'm not talking to the eggheads out there, but like the people who fit that description that you just gave, if you're publishing content, if you're publishing offers, if you're sending emails, if you're creating without a lack of awareness of what the person on the other end is experiencing right now and what they're going through, right? Home affordability, right? It's, real estate is intensely local, right? Home affordability, rent versus home prices, what's happened to car prices, and average interest rates, right? Go try to get a house, go try to get a car loan right now. If you're publishing right now and you're not paying attention to what the reader, the real person on the other side of your messages is dealing with, get out of the industry, go do something else, because you're not doing your customers any good, and you're not doing the rest of the industry any good.
Amen. Amen. That's the thing is, it's kind of like, if we're going to be honest, like I always have this kind of thing in the back of my head where it's kind of like the first rule of FinPub is don't fuck with people's retirement. Like don't fuck them over because you're just trying to make a sale.
If you can't send a message, if you can't put an offer in front of somebody right now and honestly come up with a very long list of reasons why it's helpful to them and their situation, right? Regardless of the climate, but especially at times like this is helpful to my prospects, to my reader, for this list of reasons. This puts them in a better position. It helps them take more control of their future, their finances, make better decisions, right? Achieve peace of mind, all these lists of benefits that we want to go through. If you can't do that, don't send that offer, because you're not doing them justice.
Amen. And that's what I think, like, I think it's almost like a culture issue in that, and part of it is a staffing talent issue in the sense that, like, these businesses work because of great editorial. Like there's an editorial piece and there's a marketing piece, and the marketing gets the sales on the front and the editorial keeps the sales on the back. And I feel like, it's very easy, especially when things were like the roaring 2020, when you're staffing up, you have a lot of people who are coming into the industry who aren't really into markets, or you have junior staff who are just trying to learn the industry. And there's so much they're trying to absorb that they don't necessarily they don't see the connections between things, but like starting with the customer and like actually understanding that, like, hey, like in difficult times like this, it's not just that the market is kind of uncertain. That uncertainty is happening against a backdrop of, like you said, like personal financial pressure on your readers, and talking to them about that versus just having some random copy idea that is disconnected from your reader entirely, and in some cases from the market entirely. It's probably not, it's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, no. I don't want to get into like a big generational demographics thing. I mean, I can if you want to, but what you said about like junior employees and trying to onboard them and give them a perspective on the larger sense of what it takes to put someone on a good journey that's always going to be beneficial and helpful to them every step of the way, to build trust and rapport so that you have a customer for life, not just a customer for today. Why that's important and how that affects everything downstream with every decision that you make in the business, right? In the salad days, right? And we were hiring people left and right. And it was like, you can't teach people what they need to know fast enough to keep up with the pace at which the business is moving. Like, I mean, that was a recipe for disaster. So like now we're being, I mean, and again, like, I don't want to be too specific about anything, but like we're being very particular. We're like, what's your worldview? What's your background? What's your expertise? Right. So that's cutting a little bit of the bottom end of like the entry level out, because we're looking for people who have some experience. They've like 2008 is a great example. 2008 was 15 years ago. It's gonna be 15 years ago this fall. But in the grand scheme of things, that's a blink of an eye. I want to work with people who were around in 2008. Like I'm not a salty, I haven't been around since the beginning of time. I haven't been around since direct mail in the 70s, but I was in the business in 2008. So I have a little bit of perspective about how quickly things can go sideways for so many people, right? How quickly the markets can crater, and then how quickly they can recover, right? If the biggest thing that's ever happened to somebody in their scope of experience in this business is the relatively brief, painful though it was, but the relatively brief COVID crash in the spring of 2020, like I'm looking for a larger perspective when I want to talk to people right now. Like what else have you seen, right?
Yeah, and I think that's like I remember I had Porter Stansberry had like this long list of books. And he was like, everybody who comes into the business should read these books. And they were all finance books. None of them were marketing books. They were all finance books. And it's like, I think that like,
in the fall, funny thing about in the fall of 2006, when I started at Agora Financial, the stack of books, I disappeared behind the stack of books that was put on my desk the first week. And the message basically was, don't come out from behind that pile till you've read everything. That was pretty much it. So I get where he's coming from. Yeah.
Nice. I think because I think of like FinPub as like, if you're intellectually curious, this is one of the greatest places in the world to be, right? Because we're at this intersection of like markets, business, economy, geopolitics, policy. Like consumer behavior. Like if you're interested in like the world and people, like this is a phenomenal place to be, and there's so much. But if you're not intellectually curious, then you're only able to go so far here.
Yeah, I agree.
And the business suffers when like you have editorial or publishing folks or copywriters who aren't actually interested in things, because you can't talk to the customer even on his own level, because I remember when I first started writing financial, right? Like I wrote things in copy that like an editor is like, this makes no sense because you don't understand. And I'm like, oh shit, I don't understand. You're right, I don't understand that. So now I have to go read, I have to go study, I have to talk to people, have them explain it to me. And then it's like, so even the quality of what you put out from a copy perspective seems to be like, if your knowledge is thin, then your copy is thin.
Well, that's a grave mistake that a lot of businesses make. I see it every day. I'm on, we're all on seed accounts, and I immediately disconnect as soon as I have even the faintest whiff that what I'm reading, the person who created it doesn't really understand what they're talking about. You see it all the time. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's a way a lot of messages are created.
All right, so to not just be the two old guys who are bitching about everybody's how would you put, like, what makes a editor great? Like what's a great editor look like?
Well, a great editor first has all those things that we just talked about. They truly understand in an everyman way. They understand the full spectrum of the people that their messages are going to reach, right? Mm-hmm. A guy told me one time that a good editor too is a gregarious loner. I love that expression. I love that phrase, because he can go to a conference and present on the stage and give a room full of people his best ideas. And then when it's over, he can shake a few hands, answer a few questions, and just disappear into the crowd and watch the rest of the presentations too, because he's always learning, right? He always wants to see what's coming next, A great communicator, right? Somebody who's like, their integrity, their honesty, and the way that they communicate is what's most important to them. Everybody wants conversion, of course, but like people who are like, this is truly in my heart, this is what I believe, these are decisions that I make for my own family, this is what I want to communicate to the world, this is my stance, and this is what I stand for. That's a good editor, because that's somebody that I can build around that, because with that foundation, I know that we're building on concrete, we're not building on sand.
Yeah. Do you think how many of the good editors, I mean, I always think of it as they have to have like mastery of the markets in terms of the intellectual side. They have to understand it deeply, but then it's not just enough to understand it. Like, you have to have a view that's not the same as everybody else's. You have to have a unique kind of like perspective on, like, because the markets or the world is like this, I believe this, and that's what I'm bringing you.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to say it. You have to have a unique perspective that you can back up, and you have to be forceful enough, have a strong enough personality to essentially stand up and shout it from the rooftops and get people to pay attention to that perspective, right? And that's a big ask. Like, some editors have that more than others, right? But here's what I believe. Here's what I stand for. Here's the solutions and the ideas that, if you believe the same thing, I can help you achieve. I can help you get to. And here's what I'm willing to do to get that message out there, and build as big of a tribe around this idea as possible. Yeah, if you have all that with a basis in unassailable integrity, honesty, good business practice. If you have all that, you're in good shape. You can do something. That's a really good editor.
Yeah, and I think of you guys. I think like Mauldin is, it's like the one of the large letters that or pubs that, like, you have a lot of, I would say, professional investors, not just retail investors that subscribe to you. You have a lot of advisors, you have a lot of the professional world, it seems like, that subscribes to you guys. And
that's from the basis of reliability that's been built in the business long before I got there. So yeah, we're proud of that.
Yeah, and I think it is one of those unique things that, like, or it speaks to, like, how well you guys are communicating and understand the markets, that, like, people who really understand it are, like, looking over here and saying, I want to hear what they're saying.
And that's in large part, that's a reflection on the editorial and the editorial process. But it's a ton of time beating up ideas, right? Let's get the idea as sharp as we possibly can. And then when we write it up, whether it's free or paid editorial, wherever the case may be, we're going to spend as much time as necessary to make sure that it's interesting. It's like the content itself is more important sometimes than the publishing schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes it's like, oh, the email's got to go out at 4 o'clock or everything stops. You know, no, it goes out when it's right. It goes out when the case is clear. It goes out when we're saying exactly what we want to say.
So what's that process look like for you guys when you say you're beating up the editorial and making sure it's right?
Let's look at it's ongoing. It's like a big ongoing roundtable, right? So NVIDIA, I'll use NVIDIA. That's a big one this week, right?
Mm-hmm.
NVIDIA rips. NVIDIA is like the gateway drug to the possibility of AI right now. And everybody's like, Jensen Huang is, he's like the best thing ever, he's been around for a long time, right? And a lot of people have made a lot of money on NVIDIA already, but like, do I want to hold NVIDIA now? Is NVIDIA going to go to $1,000 a share? Is NVIDIA looking toppy, or are we going to dip here? What's the 6-month plan for those are the questions that we're asking in these, like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, so let's just talk about NVIDIA. Let's talk about the GPUs or whatever. Look, I'm not
Right.
the tech expert, but like that was going to be a huge support infrastructure for the crypto boom a couple of years ago. So NVIDIA has big pop, right? And then NVIDIA kind of like they go down a little bit. Now they're an AI darling again, right? Well, there's something under the hood here about NVIDIA is always one step ahead what the largest trend seems to be over the last couple of years. So maybe regardless of short-term, and again, not personalized investment advice, I'm just talking about ideas. Maybe NVIDIA's got some kind of special sauce where they're going to be one step ahead when we actually get to the first inning of what the real AI boom is going to look like. So maybe I want to maintain some exposure to NVIDIA for the longer term, no matter what. Okay, what do we think, right? And then we beat that up, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually we come to a thesis which is coherent and we're like, this is what we have to say about NVIDIA today.
Wow. So that's a pretty robust process then for your editorial. How many people are involved in that?
Everybody.
Really?
It was like, your business can be successful a variety of different ways, but and personally, like sometimes it works better than others, but I like when there's no distinction between, like, if you have an idea and you've done your own research and you have homework and you have something to contribute, do it. And we try to support that as much as we can. So it's collaborative.
That's very cool.
Dan, if you talk to Dan again, he might disagree with some of what I just said, but I think he would agree.
He's talking about Dan Steinhardt, who's a publisher over at their sister publication or publisher, Risk Hedge, who we did a conversation with a while back. And that, it's interesting to me because, like, you and Dan are both market people, and that doesn't mean you don't understand copy and promo, but like whenever I talk to you, it's like the markets come first. And I always find like being able to talk to so many different publishers, it's really interesting to me to see which publishers, like when I talk to them, what are the things that come up the most? And they fall into a couple buckets, right? Or a few buckets. One of them is there's the people who really just like talk about markets. They understand and they can engage at the highest levels on promo and other things. But the thing that gets them going is the editorial and the markets. And then you have the people who are all promo. They can talk about the editorial stuff, but they're all promo. And every time you talk to them, the thing that they're talking about is promo.
Yeah.
And
I can exist in different planes simultaneously, mm-hmm. But I think I'm the first category. What's most compelling to me is what's going on. What's the story that needs to be told right now that no one else is telling, based on the research firepower that we have at our disposal? What do people need to know about? And then how are we going to communicate that as sharply as we can? So mm-hmm. like distilling the biggest stories in the markets so that people can take action and hopefully benefit from them. That's the interest. That's the juice for me.
Yeah. That's the essence of both the product and the marketing, right? In a different way. So I think that's cool. And like and I'm not denigrating the people who are marketing first, promo first. They just usually you need to have somebody who has a really strong editorial director who really does all the market like stuff. where I think the industry gets off the rails sometimes, or different individuals get off the rails sometimes, is when the promo idea leads everything else, right? Because like, especially if it's like a copywriter had an idea, the editor isn't comfortable with the investment, but there's this push that we can sell this, and so like they kind of like force it, and I think that's where like you end up long term with like trust issues with your, or quality issues with your customer, probably complaints,
Yeah,
and
that's bad. That's all bad. You don't want to do that.
yeah,
Anybody who's watching the show, and if you're like, oh, that's an interesting idea, don't do that. That's bad. That will torpedo your business.
exactly. Yeah. And so like, how do you approach, so then you know, how do you approach promo then, over there? Like when you have like strong editorial, you have, you know, really robust ideas that are really like focused. So when it's time to create like either an acquisition or a back end, like, how are you thinking about that process? How does the ideas for the promo generated? Like, what do you guys do?
Yeah, does the quality of the idea, the timeliness of the idea, is the idea actionable, right? If you check all those boxes, you got to go down that list. Does it rise to the level of potentially supporting an effort?
Mm-hmm.
And it's either yes or no. Like, you know, mentor to me years ago, he was like, there's buckets. Ideas exist in buckets, and there's one that's like, that checks all the boxes. It's a slam dunk. We should develop that, right? And then there's one where it's like, it's too hard. It's a good idea, but it's too hard right now. Like we're missing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the ones where it's just like, you know, like it's like, you know, some water utility that pays a great dividend, right?
Right.
Like, like, yeah, it's great. Like you know, it may check a lot of the boxes, but if that idea is really that good, we're just going to put it in free editorial, and we're just going to put it in front of people, right? Because it doesn't rise to the level of like crafting a campaign around.
Yeah. So what are the kind of the boxes that you think about when then for something that you craft a campaign around? Like,
is it unique? Well, it's like 4Us, right? Is it unique? Is it useful? Can I spin, you know, urgency and ultra specificity around this, right? Is it, again, I'm a huge believer in, if not the story that isn't being talked about right now, the angle on the story that isn't being talked about right now. News, in my opinion, I'm speaking solely for myself as a consumer of news, financial and otherwise, news is a never-ending tsunami in this day and age that doesn't stop crashing against me, all the platforms that I use, my television, my phone, you know, everything. If I am out in the world using a device, I am the tsunami of new. When most of it is not exactly news, it's just it's opinion wrapped as news, or it's right, or it's some sort of like voyeurism or whatever you want to say, right? But it's never ending, right? Mm-hmm. So the sources that I can go to receive quote unquote news, right, financial or otherwise, are unlimited. How am I going to break through that noise? And my message, my idea that my editor is so passionate about and believes in so strongly, how am I going to punch through that wall of noise so that what reaches my reader on the other side is the actual signal, that what can benefit them, right? That's the conversation. Like, how are we going to punch through the tide, right, the wave, to get to the spot where the message is going to have a chance to land? That's it. That's the work.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that about the news, because I watched, you know, I used to be a news junkie, and then you just realize like with the 24-hour news cycle, all they're really doing is they've got like, it's like they're covering the White House. Okay, all they're really doing is putting out press releases, or the White House puts out a press release, you report on the press release, somebody else disagrees with it, and then you talk about your opinions on the damn thing. And it's like, yeah. And so like
it's a simple equation too. The more of anything that there is, the less the quality becomes over time, right? So it was cable news, and then it was the internet, and now it's different platforms. It's nonstop and it's constant, right? And then I put myself as a consumer of news, right? I'm gonna buy a car. let's just say, right? I want to find out where the best deals are right now. Who's got the best inventory? Who's already defeated all the supply chain shocks and all this, right? Who has the lowest markups? How am I going to get the best rate? Right? All the boxes I have to check when I go buy. It's never ending. Like, and at a certain point, I'm either going to get an answer searching for it or I'm not. And eventually I'm just going to have to bite the bullet, step onto a lot and roll the dice. Right. Just that's an analogous example in my mind. Or like people are out there and they're like, my goodness, like my 401k could be in peril. Like these markets are very soft and I'm scared right now. What about that 529? What about, right? Like, what are my decisions? Right. And it's like, they look around and like, we got to punch through. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, that's good. Do you guys work with in-house writers, copywriters only, or do you guys do?
Yeah, we have a good team, small but good team. Yeah, good background, good experience. You gotta be nimble too. Like I like copywriters better. You know, they're good at more than just one thing. Is the right way to say it. So yeah, we have a lot of flexibility on our team too, which I'm very, very proud of. We can write in multiple modes. The copy team.
That's important. That's actually just a subject that I don't think we talk about enough too. Is that a lot of copywriters have, you have there's a promo type that this guy's good at, right? This guy can write a systems promo, and he can do it really well. But you give him a forecast, and he struggles, or he's got to tell a stock story and he's just completely at sea, has no idea how to deal with it. And like having a versatile team that can handle multiple promo types, kind of package types, like allows you to have or express the ideas that you have more accurately, I think. And copywriters that are out there, like I would encourage everybody, like, look at your own promos that you've written, and like you'll see there's a pattern that you have of things that have worked and haven't worked, and like you should be aware of what those are, and then try and strengthen like the things that are maybe not your best one, or at least have more than one type of promo that works for you.
Yeah, but I mean, you can do very well as a one-trick pony, but they all eventually get a ticket to the glue factory. So
yeah,
you need to
hold up. You're freezing up here.
If you're there and you're listening to this audio set, be useful to a business. Yeah, you got me. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, you're back now. Sorry, you froze up there.
Oh, sorry. Did you hear my glue factory joke?
No, I missed the glue factory joke.
I said you can do very well for a time as a one-trick pony, but they all eventually get a ticket to the glue factory. So if you're watching this and you think that might be you, get to work expanding your skill set so that you can bring more value to the business that you're a part of and ultimately better serve those readers.
Yeah. What are the other things what are kind of your other hot buttons in publishing? What are the things that like piss you off or get you going?
Oh boy. Frame me up a little bit. Give me a general topic.
Let's talk copywriters, right? Like,
yes.
So much of it drives the business. You get your front end promos, you get your back end promos, you got copywriters who can write different types of promos. What is a sign that like this copywriter is not going to work out for us?
Disengagement. I'm big on as long as you lean into the process, as long as you work hard, show up every day, and like I'm not saying you have to smile on your face because I don't, but like show up, do the work, commit to it, and engage with the feedback that you're receiving. Talk to the editors. You're building those relationships in the business. As soon as you disengage from that process, as soon as you shut down, I'm done, because you're no longer worth the investment of time when I could be doing something else. I've said that for years. Like if you stay with me and you stay active in the pursuit of improvement, I will drag you, if I have to, over the line to get you to a place where you are in a position to be successful. I can't guarantee that you will be, but I will do everything that I can to get you in position where it's possible for you, as long as you stay with me. And when you don't, I'm done.
I think that's good. I love it's like that engagement with the, like you said, the process, I mean, do you think there's any room for anybody who's not kind of in love with the ideas in the space?
No,
It's just
no, those people should leave immediately as well. Go, like Cinnabon is looking for assistant managers. Like go, go put your application in. No, I'm really glad that comes up, because like, why the fuck do we waste our time doing something that we're not passionate about?
Yeah.
Right. So this is a business of conveying knowledge. This is a business of passion. This is a business of integrity. This is a business of trying to be helpful to other people so that they can achieve their goals and like do better things for their kids and their families and stuff. And if you're not truly passionate about that pursuit, go do something else. Right. If you're not passionate about the research, if you're not I don't want to read another article about ETFs. That's not what I want to do. But I need to know more about ETFs so that I can communicate like the best ideas for the next market cycle, because we need to be able to have these baskets like to form a core of our portfolio allocation in the next market cycle, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to read about more ETFs because I'm passionate about the end goal, even though right now in this instant, I might not be passionate about the daily work. Tough.
Right.
That's what we have to do to reach the end goal.
Yeah. And I think if you have any interest in the ideas in the markets, there's so many different rabbit holes to go down. Like with ETFs, like you could go down a whole rabbit hole of all the fee structures and all the problems and the way ETFs are constructed, and why you can identify that some of these things are never going to be good investments and some are, set to win. And like, there's a whole set of ideas for editorial and things in there. So there's like the asset class, there's the instruments themselves. There's like the different sectors, there's the big macro trends, there's the monetary stuff. I mean, there's so many in the individual companies, obviously, there's so many different places to kind of like fall in love with an idea and go down a rabbit hole
that's well said. And that you back to copywriters for a second. If I see that instinct in somebody and they're like, you won't believe what I read, I want to go learn more about whatever. I'm like, go do it. Come back when it makes sense. Come back when you have something to say, right? Go figure it out on your own time, and like, that's the spark that you want to see in people that you want to work with, is like, I didn't know XYZ, and then off they go,
Right.
That I love that. That's the good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'm always asking people, what have you read recently? And like, there's books that I go back to, like, there's a good, it's not too old. It's How the World Really Works by Vaclav Smil.
Yeah.
And like, it's amazing because he basically starts at the very base of the supply chain with energy and shows how that just flows through everything and impacts everything. So it's just like, it's an amazing like book of how the supply chain works and its impact on like the real world and individual people's lives. And like, people, I think, like right now, like, oh, you see supply chain in the news, and you ask some people in the industry sometimes, and you're like, well, what are their thoughts on it? And it's like, they're basically just going to parrot back to you what they saw in the news. And it's just like what are you telling your readers? And then you have great editors who have like deep knowledge about like explaining why the news story misses the point or isn't telling, again, like to your point, like there's a story that's not being told, and there's all these things that are not being told about this big news story, but that news story is what people are paying attention to. So if you have something different to say about it that matters, you can punch through and get that attention.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to sum it up. That's really well said.
Nice. What, I don't know, like what are some of the best, well, let me go back to 2008 for a second, actually, because I think it is a big point that like a lot of people haven't been through a bad market and they don't know what it looks like from Pup's perspective. And I keep trying to beat the dead horse that like, hey, this is like where we're at right now with like conversions on the back end not being as strong and people not spending as much. Like, we've been here before, right? And so what do you remember from like how that period went back then, and when was the turnaround kind of starting, and when did you start, do you think you start to notice it, and like just from a pub perspective, right?
Sentiment was trending in poorly. And again, there's people, you have people in your YouTube channel far more qualified than myself to discuss this, because I was a junior guy at the time, right? And you got people that could speak to this from a higher level. But sentiment was trending negative for quite some time before the fall of 2008, before it got bad, right? But I mean, like, I remember I was young. I was 28 at the time. I remember not having a framework or any context to understand what was the maximum possible downside, if that makes sense. Because the conversation at the time was like, you know, the bailouts, and like, if we don't do this by Monday, we might not have like, go watch Too Big to Fail, or, you know, these dramatizations of what took place. Well, they come from books who were written by people who were in the room. So there's very strong grains of truth to, you know, these stories. Like, what if there is no milk in the store and the ATMs don't work come Monday morning, right? And as a 28-year-old who's trying to come up, trying to, like, you know, establish myself, and like, I'm like, what if that's true, right? So then in retrospect, I put myself in the position of real people, right? Not the Wall Street people who were like making the decisions and getting bailed out by the Washington people. Real people, right? People with mortgages and families and obligations, and right? Like, my God, what must have that time period been like for them, with so much uncertainty, and then people were losing their jobs? Like, watch the movie Up in the Air, right? With George Clooney. That it's stark. It's very stark, but that's an accurate representation of what, I mean, it was just a shockwave that ripped through the economy that summer and fall with astonishing intensity, and changed everything, every assumption that millions of Americans had about what was possible financially. And many people, it took over a decade to recover, right? People's credit was ruined. They lost homes, right? They lost jobs. They had to relocate, right? We think of like the post first wave COVID relocation boom, right? Like, everybody like moving to Idaho and Florida, and like, you know, we think of that as like some like, oh goodness, we're finally free. It's like this great like leisure pursuit, right? Back then it wasn't like, back then it was like fundamentally the basis of the American economy was under significant stress, and it was an open question what it would look like on the other side. And so, what stocks do we buy? How do we continue to publish? What's the, you know, right? Those are the questions that we had to answer in that time. And it was just like, I just remember it, you know, I'm sorry that it took place, and it was such a negative effect for so many people. But as a writer, as a researcher myself at the time, it accelerated my learning, because we were like, okay, there is absolutely zero margin for error for us right now. It's got to be right, and it's got. And I'm 8, 9, 10. I'm really proud of the effect that the business had. I was proud to be a part of the industry and part of the business at that time. That was we helped.
Says a lot.
We helped.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And I think like going back to what you were saying earlier about really understanding where that customer is, right? Like in 2008, you have, if you were somebody who was either close to retirement or in retirement,
my own family.
Yeah.
My own family. I saw it firsthand. It was devastating. People worked private pensions, union employees. People worked blue collar jobs. Since the 35 years, people worked jobs, and it was gone. It changed what was possible in an economic reality for millions of Americans essentially overnight, in a quarter, in such a, right? And the American consumer, the American economy is incredibly resilient. It's the best economy in the world, right? People bounce back, they come back, right? And some people didn't, you know?
Right.
And to think that, like, you know, who's to say, over speculation, malfeasance, like whatever led to whatever, right? We can do another call on that someday.
Yeah.
But like, that's what the consumer, that's what the reader, that's what real people are up against. And that's the responsibility.
Yeah.
As Lisa said, I don't mean to be like, we're not heroes. There's no over grandirizing or whatever the term would be, but it's like, if you can't, you said earlier about like passion, right? If you can't take that work seriously, go do something else.
Yeah.
Because we want people to be resilient and prepared and on strong footing, so that, God forbid, anything like that ever happen, like debt ceiling, it doesn't get figured out. We default, de-dollarization, right? The yuan is, the linchpin of oil trading around the world, and the dollar collapses suddenly, right? God forbid any of that ever happens, but we want to help people be able to access strategies that have them as prepared as possible for those black swan style events. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, actually that also pulls through, like, there's so many different ways to take that when you think about the customer, because there's different customer segments. And if you're a get rich quick trading kind of product creator, your customer is, generally speaking, somebody who's got $5,000 in his trading account. You're getting messages from them, because I used to work with people who did this years, like back around 2009. I remember seeing these things, and it was like, so you get this email from a customer who is like, hey, I'm disabled, on disability. I make $32,000 a year, and I'm wondering if this $5,000 product is going to be able to help me to get a full-time income. And you're like, what the are you selling to these people? That customer is very, very different on, you can set the ethical issues aside, because some of them will, people make their own bad decisions. Like, there's a buyer beware element. I get that. But fundamentally, it's a very different customer than somebody who is retired, has had a successful career. Like, I think Mike Ward told me one time that Richard Stanton Jones, this copywriter from the 90s, is great, described the best customers in publishing as the millionaire pig farmer, right? Somebody who's built a really successful personal career in either a professional or non-professional environment. They're retired. They maybe have $1 million, $1.2 million in their bank account. And that customer has very fundamentally different needs, different interests, different fears, different issues than the first customer. And if you don't know who you're talking to,
can I speak to that?
I'd love to. Yeah, love you too.
That's why it's an incumbent on you as a publisher, as a creator, as someone who's putting ideas out there. By any means necessary, you need to know your customer base. You need to do the work. You need to meet them. You need to correspond with them. You need to profile them. You need to build as robust a data set around who your customer actually is. And that helps guide what you offer and how you go about putting strategies out there as well. If you don't know that and you're scattershot, like it can be devastating. It's incumbent to I don't think I'm going to improve on that. If you haven't done the work to truly and honestly know your customer, who they are, what they're about, what they value, what they're afraid of, what their goals are, right? If you don't have that in your head accurately, like, you can have it, but it can be bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have an accurate picture of what that person looks like before you start creating, bad news. Can't do it. You got to do that work. You absolutely have to do that work. And if you're selling those products that you talked about in the first example, I put them in the you should leave and go work at Cinnabon as well.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is that, like, I remember getting a comment. This was like my first, like, I entered into the trade education space, didn't know anything at the time. I was a copywriter, very interested, but, like, you don't know what you don't know when you're, first doing stuff. And I remember seeing a comment from a customer that said something like, I lost $500,000 trading options, and I think it's time for me to start to try and learn from somebody who knows what they're talking about. And he was just coming into the market because he had already said, I mean, who knows if it was accurate, but he basically said he played around on his own and lost most of his savings trying to play options without really understanding what he's doing. And then he comes in and you're like, okay, that guy's an idiot. That guy needs help. You can help that guy. But if you're also just encouraging him to do more shitty kind of trades that are never backed up. And to that point, like, this was a kind of a I won't say career defining moment, but this was a personal moment for me. I had wrote this first promo, and it was an option service that I didn't know. I took all the stuff from the editor, right? I'm like, he knows, and he had all these spreadsheets, he had all this stuff, and I sold what he gave me. And I took it, and it did well. And I went to a friend of mine who used to design commodity trading systems for Milburn, which is a commodities, it's like a $1 billion, $2 billion firm. And he looks at it and he's like, none of this is true, John. I'm like, what? And he's like, none of this stuff that you're saying about like the way this thing works is accurate. And and I'm like, what do you mean? And I showed him all the stuff the guy gave me, and like, and he's like, yeah, he's full of shit. He's full of shit. And it was like, I was like, oh fuck. Like, I wrote the words that sold people into that product. Like, it was me that did it, even though right. And like, that made me like, I put a rule with that client, and I don't know, it's kind of like, if you have a success and it's hard to find a good copywriter, and so people kind of do what you want if they need you, I guess. I was like, I'm not going to promote any other products unless I can see a real money track record. Like, show me what they actually did, or else. And to his credit, he went and started finding people that had real money track records. And we found like Tim Sykes, he was doing some courses there. And then and Tim had brokerage statements. He could show his like $12,000, whatever, bar mitzvah money into 4 million in X number of years. And so like, but that, I remember that hitting me, and I was like, oh, I feel like a complete piece of shit. Right? Because I just wrote a promo that said these things that turned out not to be true because I didn't understand what the guy was saying. And then that for me was like, I have to go like dive into understanding all this stuff. And then it turns out like it's just really interesting, and I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you get hooked on the good stuff. Like, we were early on. This was 2017. We were early on cannabis legalization, the first wave of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like our editors, our editorial team, like experience on like from like a new emerging market standpoint, and like what it could mean and like the medical implications and these things. And like, yeah, I just remember like just being so excited to learn, not from like, oh gee, now great, everybody gets to smoke pot, like not that part, but like what the implications could be, right? Like, AI is a good example. It's better, it's more current, right? Like should I be frightened? Is this going to take my job? Is it going to take everybody's job? Is this the biggest thing that's ever happened? Is this the transition from wood to oil? Is this going to spark a new industrial revolution?
Right.
Like what, 5 years, 10 years from now, right? So like that, like being able to dive in head first on the big new thing that no one's talking about yet. Mm-hmm. Like, forget from passion. It's like the third time I've mentioned passion, right? But that's kind of like the thing I want to impart, I guess, as this interview continues to develop, is you have to be genuinely passionate about those ideas, because collaboratively among your team, that's what's going to lead to the best ideas that go out, And yeah, and cannabis was so much fun just too, because like our editor had it knocked cold from the beginning, and he was like, these are going to be the best opportunity. We're going to go to Canada over these Tilrays and stuff like that. And I was like, excuse me, it was very successful. Mm-hmm. And today it's like, this was 6 years ago, six and a half, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It was so fresh and so unique. And like, I wouldn't, like, you talk about like cannabis ideas with people today, they're like, so what, right. old news. I don't care. So, and it's interesting, like to be in front of stories like that and on the edge of telling them, like, God, that's just so much fun. And it's such a unique thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that comes when you have like team members and editors who are like, they're out in the world, like talking to people. They're in industries, they're talking to people. They're not just like journalists in the background who are not really, or just reporting news that comes across their desk. I think it's like you have like people who are really engaged in like, they're going to conferences, or they're meeting people, they're talking to people, they have a relationship or expert network that they've developed over their career, and they're not just like kind of Googling stuff.
Yeah,
and then writing.
Absolutely. Like a deep background, real world experience, a personal track record, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I've been here, I've been there, I've been doing this for 25 years. Like those are the types of editors that you build like really robust franchises around too. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think about when you build a franchise for an editor, like, um, I've seen different approaches where people will build a franchise around a trend, like cannabis. They'll have a cannabis franchise, and then you see there's more of a, like, this is more just guru centric, and it's kind of like this person and his worldview. Um, where do you fall on kind of those things about,
Well,
like,
you get the editor, you get them a plane ticket and an Uber from the airport. You get them to come to town, and you sit them down. And you take away their phone and their computer and their bag and everything, and you're like, I'll take you out to lunch in a couple hours, but I need you to explain to me all the things that you can do and why and how, right? And back it up, right? Number one, I mean, just me, I'm speaking for myself. There's different schools of thought here. Reasonable people can disagree, but you never, ever, ever, ever want to take your editor out of his or her comfort zone, right? So we're going to stay in your comfort zone, but what are all the different expertise? What are all the subject matters in which you have, unimpeachable expertise, right? Tech, biotech, I can do this, I can do that, right? I did this, 10 years ago when I was consulting, I did this, and I have some experience over here, right? Okay, so now, like, okay, what's possible right now apart from what we're doing with you, right? You have product X. How does your skill set possibly inform the potential to also do product Y? And then if that's good, we can continue, you know what I mean? And then you step by step it. I mean, that's the perfect case. You have an editor who has multiple skill sets. They have true, honest to goodness subject matter expertise in a wider segment of fields, and then that gives you that optionality to be able to build.
Okay.
Second thing is, like, if the editor's like not if it's a more painful process for them, let's say in creation of editorial, and you need to put more support around them, and it just would be too much of a headache to put them in front of another letter, you go get them help. You go find you, and then that's a marriage, right? You got to go find the analyst and the editor and the editorial team to put with them to continue to build the silo where there's really good synergy and exchange of ideas, right? You don't want pissing contests. You don't want competition like that. Like, if you're all in this together, we have to be in perfect alignment, right? So, I mean, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but you can build a franchise like horizontally and vertically, depending upon how the personalities all fit and the skill sets.
Cool. So then the franchise idea essentially becomes an extension of just the expertise of the editor, and it's not necessarily
I mean,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, like, if don't take an editor out of their comfort zone, because then everything becomes more difficult, right? Maybe they can do it. It's possible, right? Because, I mean, these are like, we're dealing with like ultra high performers, super smart people, very accomplished people with great Rolodexes. So we have all that, right? But still, like, why would I force them into something that's not in their wheelhouse, when if I do decide for whatever reason that that's a good idea for the business, I'll just go get that person. But I want to keep this editor, like I said, like right in his or her wheelhouse.
Right. But, like, I'm thinking about this in terms of, like, so what if you have a guy he has this deep biotech experience, and for whatever the hell reason also has this deep, like, I don't know, like, oil experience, two things that you don't think tend to form a good franchise. Like, how would you think about putting this product together for him? And then also, how do you think about front end versus back end product?
Well, first of all, if I have a guy who's a biotech savant and then also has great experience in oil, exploration and production, I give him whatever he wants because I have a unicorn. So I'm happy with that problem, but I'll figure that out, and he's probably going to get more expensive next time he comes up, right? So yeah, front end. I mean, and again, like, I guess, different. You talk to 10 people, you'll probably get 10 different answers. Reasonable people can disagree, but every backend silo of products is better if it has a naturally connecting front end. And that silo overall is stronger if it's led by one main personality, right? So then eventually you have, backends of various specializations, right? That all stems from a front end. Like, yeah, you can make a back end work on the other side of a free letter, and you can have a free letter to a front end, and maybe that flow of monetization goes to somebody else's string of backends. But if it's completely vertical in that way around one personality, that's always ideal.
Yeah, I've seen it. Like I remember, like there was I've seen like in a put it, front ends and like back ends tend to increase. Like I've seen people break it down where the front end is the more stable and the back end is the higher risk, higher reward.
Oh, sure. Oh, for
version,
sure.
right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And then if you're doing a skill-based thing like trader education, then it's almost like the back end is proximity to the guru. Like, here's how I do it. Here's me doing it for you. Here, let's do it together, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
that's old school Maven Matrix Manifesto, Rich and Jay, like guru top of the mountain type stuff, like personal experience, that sort of thing. Yeah, and the front end is like clean, easily presented, actionable ideas that will benefit essentially the entire possible audience. You know what I mean?
right.
Like, keep it easy, keep it clean, keep it digestible. That's a good front end. Tell good stories, like build good relationship, like be real, right? Don't like, this is all 101 level stuff too for your audience, but like you get me talking about this stuff. Like I read I pay for a lot of stuff and I read a lot of front end copy and I'm just like who do you think you're talking to? And it annoys me. Sorry.
I don't think it's 101. I think it's fundamental, right? Like, and like you can't beat up the fundamentals too much. Like we got to keep hitting them again because we all forget sometimes. And like we need to be reminded that the fundamentals matter. And I think the market right now has reminded everybody that the fundamentals matter.
Hey, I got one for you. Speaking of fundamentals, this I won't name names. I won't say anything. But God help you if you send me multiple emails in the same day with the same subject line. Different body content, but you think your subject line is so good and your early data leads you to believe that it is. So you send a different message under the same subject line that you sent me hours ago. God help you if you do that. If you're out, you want to talk about fundamentals, we could do another call just on like how lazy can you be? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Email is so difficult. It is so competitive. The moment, the blink of an eye in which you have my attention is so fleeting. How dare you disrespect my inbox? How dare you bore me and disrespect my time like that by being lazy and demonstrating it and putting your laziness right in my face from noon to 4 p.m. and doing it a second time? How dare you?
Yeah. So, I mean, it is a relationship, right? You mentioned the relationship piece, and it's like you're building a relationship, and it's like that's more than anything else. Like who the email is from determines whether you open it or not. That's a relationship question. And so, like, if my wife sends me an email, I'm opening it, right? If it's an editor or somebody that I'm like, holy shit, I love the way this guy thinks. This guy's helped me so much. I read what he sends. If it's just the same generic shit that is like, the same recycled marketing headlines, and like it's not like you just start to like your eyes glaze over, like you said. You just like,
great evaluation that everyone watching can do right now. Go look at the last 10 emails that you sent and weigh them honestly. Honestly, put on your honest evaluation glasses and look at those emails and ask yourself, when this lands in my readers and my prospects inbox, am I seen as a friend or am I seen as a pest? And if it's even a question mark, if there's one that's kind of in the middle and I'm like, no, this one might be a little pesty, right? You're a pest. You have to be a friend in your prospects email inbox. Otherwise, you are facing problems.
Yeah. It's funny. It's interesting because I get a lot of guys and they're great people and they have great products. And this is almost a problem, is that this is more true on like the active trading side than it is anywhere else, because some of the guys with really great trading backgrounds in history, and trading services, they're not editorial people, right? And so they're so fixated on how good their product is that it should be huge. It should be huge. And it's like, and then they get angry when they're like, oh, well, all this shitty marketing and stuff is what's making things work. And it's like, no, the relationship building, like you're doing no relationship building. You're expecting the product, which they don't even get until after they buy, right? To impress them enough to want to buy the product and sell it and stay with it. But you've built no relationship. They're not paying attention to your emails. How are they going to even know about it? Because they don't know you. They don't understand you. They don't have your worldview. They don't have like anything that is personal about it. And it's like, you have a great product that's sitting there and dying on the vine because you won't take the time to build a relationship through the medium that we have, which is like email and everything else.
Yeah, I would say to those people, that's great. That's great analysis to what I just said too. But like to those people, those offers, right? How much time do you spend actually before you try to sell? How much time do you actually spend telling folks who you are and what you're about, right? Or the Maven stuff, like I mentioned a minute ago from Jay and Rich years ago. You know what I mean? Like, you ever show Achilles heel? You ever show what are your greatest mistakes and how you overcame it? Do you ever take one step? Have you ever taken one step to try to establish just an ounce of commonality with your prospect, right? Okay, well, we can work on that, right? But it's like, oh, I send out these messages and they have great CTAs and my my weekly webinar traffic is declining precipitously. That's your fault. That doesn't have anything to do with your prospect universe. It's your fault because you're not doing the work to actually build an audience that wants to know more about you.
That's it. Do you guys use Gauntlet series when somebody signs up for the first time? Like, do you have like a relationship building series that's kind of like,
Sure. Yeah, it's actually built on. I don't even remember. It was years ago. I got introduced to Maven, and we used it for an editor at that time. And I've modified it a couple times. I have a couple different. I have like a 5 and a 7. But yeah, no, that's gold. I rely on that. And there's different ways to slice that, right? Like, there's ones that get a little like. Well, then there's different styles too. There's more of a soap opera series versus like straight information, right? Like, and they're all useful, but they're case by case dependent. And you need a lot of them. You need optionality too, in what those gauntlets look like, because you need to test them against one another. Because one campaign to the next might not be the same results. It might be a slightly different avatar, right? Like the assumptions in the background of the people that are coming to you on those offers could be a little bit different. You need to be able to pivot on those. So you need them, and you need people working on those who understand the classic models that they come from and do it, and then pivot away from them intelligently. Not, oh, we're just going to create 5 new ones and test them. That's not going to work.
Yeah, it's not a generic welcome series. It's I think of it as like because the first sale you're ever making is, other than pay attention, is the relationship. Like, that's it. You got to sell the relationship, and then you can't stop selling it, right?
You're setting a baseline for the things that will always be true in that correspondence, in that the life cycle of that product from that moment forward, right? It's biblical. It's biblical in nature. I'm a huge stickler for this. You cannot violate any expectation that you set to be perceived as true by your now purchaser. Anything that's in that series that is ever violated puts the entire relationship at risk. You can't do it. Like, so if it's in there, it's like, this is my background. This is where I come from. This is what I believe in. That must always be true.
Right.
Yeah. Like, again, like, sorry, I might be like out in left field, but that's a fundamental too, right? It's like, oh, this was true 6 months ago when I bought, and they told it to me 6 times over in this series. And wait a second, that's not what they're fulfilling anymore. Well, guess what? Right.
Yeah, no, totally. It's like, it's not just setting expectations, but it's like what the reader knows about them. And you can't like, oh, I thought you're the greatest biotech editor in the world, and now you're telling me that you stopped talking about biotech, and now you're randomly talking about, whatever, and I don't understand why. And now biotech is no longer part of it. Or you say like this sector is going to be a 30-year thing that matters, and then 6 months later you're like, well, that's dead, we're going to move on to something else.
Exactly. Well, there's ways to do it though too. You can editorially, you can make pivots over time,
Mhm.
but you have to be very forward about how you do it. You have to own it, and you have to come from, you have to like, so there's no card tricks. There's no sleight of hand, right? People see right through that, right? It's like, you have to be upfront. You have to, I mean, Mark talks about radical transparency, right?
Right.
Like here it is. Oh man, we really beefed it on that recommendation. Here's what we think happened. Here's the corrections that we've put in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again. We're going to charge forward who's with us, stuff like that. Like
Mhm.
that's like the same way you would like, so much of it is a mirror. I swear, I said this the other day talking to copywriters. Just look in the fucking mirror sometimes, and it's like, if I buy X mirror, what type of experience do I want? How would I like, right? Just do that. Like you see so much like shitty treatment out there. It's like, just look in the mirror
Yeah.
and be like, that's what I would want my experience to be like.
Yeah. Angel Suarez, actually, great copywriter, had this great line one time where he's like, your customer doesn't want a refund. He wants your product to do what you fucking said it was going to do. Right? He doesn't want the refund. He wants what you promised him. He bought based on that promise. He wants it to do what you said it was going to do. And if he's refunding, it's because in his mind, it didn't do what you said it was going to do.
Amen. That's well said. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't want to keep you too long. I would talk to you for 2 more hours, but I know we only had a set period of time here, so we will have to
Yeah,
do
this was
another
cool.
one.
Yeah,
I
it's
do.
cool.
I love your fucking perspective on this and the focus on passion, because I think that is, I don't know, I think it's missing in a lot of organizations these days. And it's what makes this business great, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, you think back to like the classics, and like, so now I'm gonna like a quick history lesson before we wrap up here. Like the inflation shocks of the 1970s,
Mhm.
right? Oil crisis. The flat market prior to 1982, like the Reagan economic revolution and such, and then 1987 and savings and loan in the early 90s, and tech explosion. Like if you weren't making money from 95 to 90, late 98, like you were doing something, your darts didn't have points on them because you weren't right. And then like the tech blow up, and right, and then the 2008, right, like the things that have happened before are going to happen again. And our job as creators and publishers is to the best of our ability, put the best ideas out there and make sure that as many people as possible are prepared for what's possible, what could happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's not another 2008 style meltdown in our lifetimes, right? But maybe there's another 1987, event, like on the Friday or Monday. See, I don't even know.
Black Monday. Yeah.
Black Monday.
Wasn't it?
Maybe there's another 1987 Black Monday style event, but it's far more drastic in scale, right? And what is that going to mean, right? Well, what type of ideas are people going to need to be able to see their way through that sort of thing, right? So again, like when I go off on these big rants about like the passion for the business, it's like, let's game as many scenarios as we possibly can. Think about as many things that could possibly happen in the markets, economy, policy, politics, and then publish interesting stories that get as many people engaged in preparing for those as we possibly can. That's it. That's the whole game.
Yeah.
That's the game.
Absolutely. And if you're like someone who's like new to the industry or wants to increase your not like one of the best things that I did when I was first trying to understand markets was I just went back to the first Buffett partnership letters. You could find them, and then read those going forward, and then read all the Berkshire Hathaway annual letters all the way forward. And you will get this like great, succinct, intelligent, but easily understandable conversation about the markets as they went all the way through. And it's a phenomenal resource. And most of them are free online, like you can get. And if not, there's books for it. But like, I remember that for me was like, oh, okay. Now I'm like, I've got a lay of the land at least to work from,
Hey, before we end here, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
AI, Chat GPT, what are you hearing? What's the deal? What's the story?
I don't know. There's you hear everything, right? Like, I think my view on it is one way or the other, it's going to change the basic. I think it's changing the basic tech paradigm in the last 20 years. Right. And I think that, and what I mean by that is it's going to change the way that the internet works. Like just like social media in 2007, the smartphone comes out and changed the way that the internet worked with social media and video. I think there's going to be something of at least that scale. That's the minimum of that scale, a change of our basic internet marketing environment, not just marketing, but the content environment, that
Yeah.
AI is going to kind of change the basic paradigm. And then how that plays through, I mean, I don't think, I don't know, like you know what I mean? Like it could go in so many different directions, and it's almost like, what's going to be the Google of AI? Like,
Yeah.
you know, or is it going to be ChatGPT? Is there something else? Is there, you know, the one thing.
An editor, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but an editor in our business said recently, he compared the rise of AI to the rise of basic internet technology. And it was, sorry, I'll get the numbers wrong. 26 years. The guts, the wiring of the internet existed, but it was essentially in secret, and it was engineers passing primitive email messages back and forth until like Netscape appears, and there's a browser functionality that brings it all forward facing, and then it's like within 10 years, Amazon's public. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's like, what if AI, like, there's advances and, you know, Gartner hype cycle stuff, and there's opportunities, but it just like trudges along for several years until like the Netscape moment, you know?
Right.
And I was like, wait a second, I'll be in my 60s by then. Like, I'm hoping for like a little bit more from AI, like in the meantime, you know.
Well,
but anyhow,
the other thing that I think is interesting about it, just to kind of go on another tangent with it, is, you know, this last kind of tech paradigm, the largest companies are in a way consumer focused, right? They're like, you know, Amazon, and they're retail, they're in advertising focused. A lot of the largest companies that are in the B2B space are just now getting into digital marketing, and that seems crazy, but it's the reality is you have these enterprise sales forces, right? And I'm having this conversation within the financial industry all over the place, where it's like, oh, this couple $100 billion firm is just now figuring out that they've only been marketing for 2 years. This national firm, this national trust company or whatever, is right now thinking about how should we have a digital strategy, because we don't have one. And so what my point with that is that with the language models and AI and how they are working with these huge data lakes, basically, that one of the things that is possible, I think, is that whoever has the biggest business data, the next big businesses it's going to be B2B data. It's not B2C data, right? Like Google and Facebook is very much on the B2C's data, but the possibility now of like having like companies that are basically working off of B2B data at scale could create companies that are even bigger than what we're seeing now. And that's kind of crazy to me.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Cool. But
hey, let's do our next call on the implications of AI specifically.
There we go.
We'll get some experts. We'll do a quick roundtable. It'll be a lot of fun.
I'm actually thinking about doing that. It's putting together a separate channel just on like ideas.
Love it.
So hey man, I appreciate you taking the time here, and thanks. This is great. I love talking to you.
Yeah, it was fun, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Talk soon, okay?
All right, take care. Bye.